Recently, while doing research for a different video, I saw a comment that said, well, Ravenpaw isn't really gay, that's just a thing people say. It was from like 2020, so it's not super relevant, but I disagree. Ravenpaw is certainly, definitely, in a relationship with another male cat. If that relationship is somehow not romantic, it is closer, deeper, and more physically affectionate than the relationships of almost all of the straight cats. If you ask, is Ravenpaw gay? The main answer is yes, or at the very least, Ravenpaw is very, very heavily implied to be in a romantic relationship with Barley as of, well, at least by 2016. But there's an asterisk after that yes, and that asterisk is basically yes, or, well, they all but say it, but they've never actually said it, not anywhere that's published. And you might have noticed recently that the official Warrior Cats website included a little graphic of him that says mate. Not applicable. Which has left a lot of people going, what? Huh? What do you mean? And to be honest, I don't know. As far as I'm aware, there are two answers here. Either A, Ravenpaw cannot be officially recognized as Barley's mate for conservative choices the team is making, or B, someone here on the Warrior Cats website is being pedantic. Probably also for careful conservative reasons or because their boss says that they can't put the mate down, but pedantic nonetheless. They've been referring to being a mate in recent books more and more in regards to actually having kits, but that doesn't stop, say, Twig Branch and Finleaf from being listed that way, or a little line being drawn between Hollyleaf and Fallen Leaves, although Hollyleaf does not have Fallen Leaves listed on her little infographic in the same way that Ravenpaw doesn't have Barley. And I'm fine with that latter thing, don't get me wrong. I think that Hollyleaf and Fallen Leaves being together is weird. If you go back in time before Ravenpaw's Farewell, the novella, had ever come out, we really hadn't ever gotten explicit authorial confirmation on Ravenpaw and Barley's relationship. It was common to see, outside of any book context, people arguing that it wasn't even a possibility. Usually citing one of two sources, Author Chat 6, where Vicky says that Warrior Cats will never tackle homosexuality, or somehow Vicky's response in 2011 where someone asks, did Ravenpaw ever get a mate or kits? If so, what are their names? And Vicky responds with, I'm afraid Ravenpaw never gets a mate or kits. He's perfectly happy with just Barley for company. But this, to me, as I cannot possibly know what Vicky was thinking in 2011, the response feels teasing, like Vicky was trying to say that he's, you know, not the type of guy who would be interested in that sort of relationship, hint hint. And by 2011, Vicky definitely knew there was a massive community around this couple in particular. Ravenpaw and Barley were a huge, big deal as a ship for a long time beforehand, even without much to go off of. They lived in the same barn, and that was enough. There were people posting fanfiction where they were a couple as early as 2007 and, well, 2006 if you count fanfictions where Ravenpaw and Barley cuddle while referring to each other as their friend. The former Warrior's Wish webmaster, Blizz, seemingly both wrote fanfiction for the pairing and a music video for that fanfiction in 2007. And if this doesn't seem particularly impressive to you because you know Warrior Cats came out in 2003, Warrior Cats fanfiction from before 2006 is pretty sparse. The first 3 books of the New Prophecy came out in 2005, with the last 3 coming out in 2006. After this, Warrior Cats switches to a 2-a-year schedule instead of a 3-a-year schedule, kind of. A super edition takes the place of what was previously the second book in a year. The earliest Warrior Cats fanfiction I can find is from 2004, and there's only 3 of it. On fanfiction.net anyway. If it's elsewhere, I don't know where to look. But the oldest /fanfiction, or more specifically, fanfiction with any gay couple at all inside that I could find casually on fanfiction.net is from 2006. It is called The Flames of Jealousy, and it is by ICA. I looked for a while, but I couldn't seem to find much that was older. It's a story that seems like it's going to be about the Ashfur, Brambleclaw, and Squirrelflight love triangle, but I clicked on it anyway just in case, and I'm glad I did. Even though it's using a title that has the word flames in it, it came out in July 2006. This means, at the time it was initially published on fanfiction.net, the author would have only read as far as Starlight, so no fire scene, no evil Ashfur, not even unhappy Ashfur would have even been on their mind yet. As they read the rest of the books and learn more about the general trajectory of the characters, they do include author's notes about it. Instead, this is a book about Ashfur being in love with Sootfur, and then them struggling with very, very year 2006 homophobia. There's 13 chapters of it, and the author got a few chapters into a sequel, but quit pretty quickly after being disillusioned with the way that the new prophecy was handling their favorite characters. Squirrelflight is an ally in its canon. I would describe every element of this one as stereotypical for its time, to the point where if it was written today, 18 years later, you'd probably not assume it was written earnestly. But it is literally the earliest Warrior Cats fanfiction with a gay couple in it that I could find, so it deserves some credit for that. And honorable mention to another 2006 fanfiction I found where Stormfur and Brambleclaw are in love, too, but as far as gay warrior cats, they were pretty hard to find before 2007 overall. Regardless, as early as 2007 and 2008, there was already a lot of precedent for Ravenpaw and Barley being together in a fandom sense. And I'm not trying to imply that the oldest ship on Earth is Ashfur and Sootfur. I'm sure that people were talking about gay ships and warrior cats earlier than this, I just can't find it anywhere. Things melt away. For comparison, the possibility of a romantic relationship between Leafpool and Cody, Mothwing or Sorreltail, was edited onto the Warrior Cats Ho Yay page on TV Tropes mid-2010. The earliest Mothpool fanfiction I can find is from 2013, unless you count one from 2011 where Mothwing as the author insert kills Jayfeather for ruining Leafpool's life. Iconic, actually. In Aaron Hunter chat number 3, which happened in May 2007, the conversation goes like this. Coppernose asks, "Will Ravenpaw have a mate?" And Vicky responds, "Not unless a cute little she-cat wanders past the barn. And you know what? I think that he and Barley are happy enough in the barn without any girls to boss them around." Then later in that same interview, we see Blizz, the author of that early Raven Barley fanfiction and the webmaster of Warrior's Wish, ask a question about it directly. Blizz asks, "What do you think of slash pairings like Raven x Barley? I know they'd never be canon, but they're very popular among some fans." And Vicky responds with, "I love the way fanfiction can explore aspects of the story that don't appear in the regular series. These characters have so much life and complexity in my mind, and I only see it as a compliment when fans explore different destinies for them. Long live fanfic." Later in chat number 6, that's where we get the two topics question, where Vicky says homosexuality isn't a topic that will be getting into any of the books. The kids in the chat respond to this in a way the fandom never would now. 2009 does not seem like it was that long ago on the surface, but it was a bit of a different landscape. Fandom spaces began to progress rapidly in their general levels of acceptance somewhere in the next couple years after this. In the same breath, the authors were promoting the brand new Ravenpaw's Path mangas. And you'll never guess what happens in those. That's right, a cute she-cat comes to the barn, and you know what Ravenpaw doesn't do? Get a mate. He doesn't even seem to think about it. Likewise, later in the manga, they stay at ThunderClan. And they visit Barley's kitty pet sister, who becomes their party member for large chunks of the second book. In neither situation does Ravenpaw manifest a girlfriend or even consider it, even though he's fond of Barley's sister. So that's one question that's been debunked. Throughout the Ravenpaw books, he questions where he belongs. Part of this is because of how much he loves the visiting little baby kittens and being in large groups of cats, and he doesn't want them to leave. This contrasts with Barley, who's satisfied with nobody but Ravenpaw around. When the visiting cats chase them out, they end up in ThunderClan asking for help. When they're in the barn, Ravenpaw and Barley sleep in separate I Love Lucy nests, side by side. But by the second Ravenpaw book, they're shown being close, and Ravenpaw leaning on Barley as they go to bed. After helping ThunderClan with their Blood Clan issue, Barley thinks that Ravenpaw wants to stay in ThunderClan. Ravenpaw insists that no, he's not a warrior, he's Barley's best friend, and they need to go back and take their barn. Ravenpaw likes living in the clan and likes being there, but he's also happy to go home. In the third book, Barley's estranged kin, Hoot and Jumper, move into the barn and start bullying Ravenpaw. At the same time, they're being pleasant and friendly with Barley, who at the very beginning is oblivious to the fact that they're treating Ravenpaw poorly. They take his nest, order him around, and lie about what Ravenpaw's been saying to them. Eventually, however, Barley notices, tells his brothers to leave, and chases them off. Afterwards, Barley tells Ravenpaw, "I sent them away because this is our home, yours and mine." He leads Ravenpaw up to the roof of the barn, and they look over their farm together. Regardless of the intentions of the authors, this entire sequence is Barley confirming that Ravenpaw is the most important person in the world to him. Even here, where nothing is too obvious, it's not hard to look at this and think of these characters as being in a relationship. It's not outright said, but there's no indication otherwise either. This is weird when contrasted with Vicky saying homosexuality will never fit into the Warrior Cats books. This contradiction is going to be something that the books are sitting on for the rest of time. But by this point, people are pretty sure that Vicky herself doesn't really have a problem with gay cats. Her answer to the shipping question was pretty supportive for the time, if careful, and we can't really know what her intentions were back then. By topics that don't fit, she could have been referring to several things. Maybe the fact that she just wasn't allowed. Maybe she believed that the language or implication wouldn't apply or matter to cats. Maybe she was just trying to imply that she would never include homosexuality as a political issue in a plotline. Although that last option is the least likely, as the things she lists previously, madness, losing faith, parenthood, aren't really treated as political plot lines, but as personal experiences. But as far as that idea goes, it is still true, even in Ravenpaw's farewell, where the cats are pretty gay. None of the other cats respond to it like it's a taboo or a bad thing. Regardless, this question haunted the Warrior Cats fandom from when it first appeared in 2009 to now. What did she mean by this? We'll never really be sure, aside from the fact that no cat has ever made reference to alternative sexualities in the books ever. Alternatively, Kate Carey offered her own explanation, which is, I would love to, but we have a lot of readers globally, and it's still a tricky subject, unfortunately, in some countries, when asked about cat sexuality, which leads evidence, I feel, to the first idea, that they're not allowed by someone higher up. I've made a video about how silly I think this is in the past. Either way, it's still the most likely explanation we've got, or at the very least, it's the one we're supposed to have. Ravenpaw and Barley stare into the sunset together, but their relationship, despite being important to each other, isn't stated out loud. It would be 6 years between the last Ravenpaw manga and the Ravenpaw novella, and in that time we got at least one more possible relationship between male cats, with a book and an author saying that they imagined Jake and Tallstar having feelings for each other, although the editors didn't agree. And we got nothing of the sort with two girls. While we get female characters, being nice to each other and being friends, we've never gotten anything on the same level as Tallstar and Jake and Ravenpaw and Barley, just not even close. The former two get entire books together about each other, and none of the female characters can boast this. Often Tallstar and Jake is treated as being more canon than Ravenpaw and Barley. This is because it had earlier author statements talking about it and pretty much nothing else. If you look at the text of the books themselves, Ravenpaw and Barley is much more obvious when we get to Ravenpaw's farewell. In Ravenpaw's farewell, Ravenpaw and Barley, as usual, live together. They take care of each other. Barley worries about him and asks him what's wrong, and even seems a bit sad when it seems that Ravenpaw might regret leaving ThunderClan. Ravenpaw immediately reassures him, and the book says, Ravenpaw was startled by the emotion in Barley's voice. He ran over and pressed his shoulder against Barley's warm flank. Don't ever think that I regret leaving the forest, he hissed. Firestar and Graystripe saved my life when they brought me to you. Since then, I've never wanted to be anywhere but your side. And while not explicit, the book teases the idea that they're in a relationship. When meeting Violet, Barley's sister, and her 10 billion baby kittens, of which she has at least 4, tiny baby Bella asks them if they have kids together. Ravenpaw says, no, but doesn't refute the clear implication. In Ravenpaw's Path as well, you might remember that Ravenpaw and Barley slept in 2 separate I Love Lucy beds. This book instead has them in a single nest, with Barley curling around him, and this isn't to say that nest sharing isn't a perfectly acceptable platonic activity in Warrior Cats. Siblings share a nest constantly. Pickle and Nightcloud share a nest in Crowfeather's trial. Blue Whisker shares a nest with Milkweed's kits. Rainflower shares a nest with Lakeshine. Moth Flight is mentioned to have shared a nest with Spotted Fur, although she implies that she hadn't. Jayfeather shares a nest with Briarlight at least once, and shares a nest with Poppypaw when she's sick and they're both apprentices. Also, Hollyleaf and Cinderheart, but I know what you're all gonna say if I put this on my platonic cuddling list. While people implying sharing a nest is inherently romantic is a massive pet peeve of mine, the difference here is that the nest is specifically referred to as theirs. Not sharing a nest or Ravenpaw's nest. It's their nest together, belonging to both of them. Raven and Barley have one bed. Ravenpaw doesn't say that the farm is his home. Instead, he refers to Barley, being with Barley as his home instead. Also, the physical interactions between Ravenpaw and Barley are incredibly affectionate. He wiggled deeper into the hay, burying his muzzle into Barley's soft fur, and Barley leaned against him, smelling warm and soft and familiar, and Ravenpaw curled up and tucked his chin into Barley's belly fur, and his old friend curled around him, just as he had always done when they slept. Additionally, when they later get into a fight after Ravenpaw wants to bring Barley's clan-enamored niece and nephew to SkyClan, Barley doesn't like the idea and does the warrior cat's equivalent of sleeping on the couch. They had hardly spoken since their quarrel on the woodpile, and at night Barley had even made a separate nest to sleep in. Ravenpaw hadn't imagined how he could feel so much pain without being physically wounded. When he leaves without him, Ravenpaw misses him greatly, even though they were fighting when he left. That said, they only spend a few chapters apart before Barley shows up, having followed them despite their fight. Barley spoke first. "I'm so sorry," he blurted out. "I should never have tried to stop you from helping Violet's kids. You were brave and generous, and I don't deserve you." Ravenpaw bounded forward and pressed his muzzle against Barley's cheek. "Don't be such a mouse brain. You were right to be concerned. It's been hard, but we're okay." He felt a lump in his throat. "Even better now that you're here." Barley nuzzled the top of his head. "I left not long after you did, and I thought that the barn was my home, but my home is wherever you are." He took a step back and blinked at Ravenpaw. I thought you were leaving because you didn't want to be with me anymore." "That will never happen," Ravenpaw meowed. "I'm sorry I left without you. I've missed you every step of the way." "Okay, if you squint, and you're really desperate, maybe you can make a universe where this isn't a romantic exchange. But... I feel like if there is, in fact, a rule in place that says the cats can't be gay, this is as blatant and explicit a confirmation as you can get. If this was Greystripe and Fireheart, they would have used words like, be a ThunderClan cat anymore, or loyal to ThunderClan anymore, or my friend anymore even. Be with me is way more loaded than any of the other options Vicky could have had when writing this. And not to spoil an 8-year-old book that is literally called Ravenpaw's Farewell, but at the end, Ravenpaw dies. And I'm going to read quite a few passages here because they're all, well, honestly more blatantly romantic than a lot of our quote-unquote confirmed cat romances. So Silverstream comes up to Ravenpaw, dead Silverstream comes up to a live Ravenpaw and tells him he will die, and it says, Ravenpaw felt a painful lump rise in his throat. "I'm afraid for Barley," he whispered. "Barley knows that you don't want to leave him. He understands, and he will not love you less if he cannot see you." And unlike in early fanfictions, the cats around Ravenpaw don't react negatively to his relationship with Barley. Whitestorm says to Ravenpaw, "We have never forgotten you," Whitestorm told him. "We have watched over you and rejoiced in the happiness you have found with Barley." He dropped his head. "And I am only sorry we could not spare you the pain you suffered in ThunderClan." As the book nears its conclusion, the things that the cats say to each other get more and more obvious. Barley's eyes filled with water. "You're so stubborn," he murmured. "I really can't stop you, can I?" "No, but you can be by my side," Ravenpaw replied. "Please." Barley leaned his head against Ravenpaw's. "Always." Barley does a rare warrior cat's literally crying with tears here. And then in the end, Ravenpaw basically dies in Barley's arms. "It's all right," Barley whispered, his voice breaking. "I know you have to leave me. I will never forget you, I promise." Ravenpaw gasped for one more breath. "I will wait for you. Wherever you are, I will find you." And he let his head fall into Barley's front paw. Everything was starting to feel very far away. This isn't the kind of maybe coincidence stuff that you might read into with other Warrior Cats characters. It's very, very plainly on the page. These cats are in a relationship. They know what they were writing here. They didn't outright say it, but likewise in 2017, when explaining that one of the quotes in Ravenpaw's Farewell could be attributed to the Hulk, Vicky mentioned that she wanted to prove how much Ravenpaw and Barley loved each other, and that Ravenpaw, quote, loved Barley with all his heart, and loved their life together, which is pretty final as far as author statements go. Similarly, 5 years later in 2022, a Vicky post reads, "It is, of course, absolutely true that Ravenpaw and Barley are a couple. I intended it right from the start. But the books were written at a different time, when it was not possible to be open and honest about that kind of thing. This was only a couple years ago as of making this video, but it feels like it's been there for a lot longer." So people have in the past tried to imply to me that Vicky was just saying this or that she changed her mind, and no, Vicky wrote Ravenpaw's path, and she did so, from what I understand, with this relationship in mind. I don't know what kind of forces would have been at work to prevent her from saying it outright within the pages, but it's not subtle. It's not something you'd miss unless you've never read the book, and honestly, I think a lot of people who want to argue that they're not a couple within its pages haven't read the book. Not only are they together, they're together and everyone in the book, children, strangers, and StarClan, all know it, and none of them have a problem with it. So our little not applicable here, it's a lie. You can argue that maybe it's ambiguous in the main series or in the comic books, but there is not a universe where that is the case in Ravenpaw's Farewell. And, okay, this isn't relevant, and forgive me if this was a big deal on social media when it was posted, I'm not there, but this Ravenpaw activity sheet for kids is hilarious. They call Barley both Batley and Barney, and they ask the kids who Ravenpaw's mother, father, and littermate was. Guys, that's not accessible information to the offline kid that this was printed out for. Anyways, aside from this, there isn't actually a huge amount of Ravenpaw and Barley together stuff on the Warrior Cats website. Honestly, there isn't even a lot of Ravenpaw stuff specifically, from what I can tell, despite how popular he is and how much content he has. There is some user-uploaded fan art, shipping pictures, but despite the sheer amount of book quotes on the website, the only quotes between Ravenpaw and Barley that I could find are the Hulk quote from Ravenpaw's Farewell and the one under the Ravenpaw's Path colored edition that says, "Blood isn't everything. Loyalty is everything, and Ravenpaw has been more loyal to me than you could in 1,000 lifetimes," which is what Barley says to Jumper and Hoot when he kicks him out of his house. But it doesn't really seem like they're avoiding it, really. A top 10 list of Warrior Cats books that will make you cry has Ravenpaw's novella at number 3, with a blurb ending in, "A final farewell to say both to his peaceful life at the barn and to the dearest cat of his life, Barley." And they could have used a less obvious word than dearest if they really wanted to, well, if they really wanted to hide the book's content. Vicky's message about the winners of the 2022 short story competition says, "The importance of Ravenpaw and Barley's relationship cropped up, especially when Ravenpaw learned of the prophecy and was torn between his happy life on the farm and wanting to fulfill his duty to his former clan, when discussing situations found in submissions." I'm assuming she was referring to lots and lots of Barley-Ravenpaw shipping fanfiction. Similarly to that, the winners of the Valentine's Day card challenge on the website featured gay cats. Tallstar and Jake, Leafpool and Mothwing, Ravenpaw and Barley, they all showed up once. And while Barley is included in neither of the Ravenpaw galleries, Ravenpaw shows up in most of the Our Favorite Barley artwork pictures. So, much like the books themselves, it seems like the website wants to avoid being explicit, but isn't afraid to, well, at least vaguely include it, and I hesitate to blame any site editors for this. I think it's probably above their heads. So, Ravenpaw is gay, and the website and the franchise doesn't really want to say that out loud, and who knows if they will ever be allowed to. But the answer is yes. Ravenpaw and Barley are in love.